If June 6th lands on your calendar and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, this is for you, because there's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from laziness. It doesn't come from lack of ambition. It comes from being the person who holds the whole thing together so consistently that no one notices what it costs you anymore. And what makes this moment sharp is that it's not just about being tired. It's about feeling responsible for what should have never been yours to carry alone. Let me ask you something that sounds simple until it hits the truth underneath it. When did being dependable become the same thing as being depleted? Because some of you don't feel stressed because you're disorganized. You feel stressed because the system you're living inside is built on your unpaid labor, your extra hours, your extra patience, your extra explaining, your extra emotional regulation. And it's easy to miss because on the surface, it looks like maturity. It looks like leadership. It looks like love. It looks like ambition. But underneath it, there's a quiet bargain you keep making with life. I'll carry more now, and it will balance out later. June the 6th doesn't create that bargain. It exposes it. It's a mirror moment, a balance and responsibility pressure point, where the weight you've been normalizing becomes visible. Caretaking, overgiving, overworking, over-explaining. Suddenly you can feel the strain of it in your body and in your bank account. And the hardest part is that you can't even fully blame anyone for it, because you volunteered for pieces of it. You offered. You stepped up. You said yes. You took pride in being the reliable one, until your reliability started to feel like a trap. If that's you, I want you to hear this cleanly. You are not weak for feeling heavy right now. You are not dramatic for being tired of handling it. You are not ungrateful for wanting the load to be shared. What you're feeling is what happens when responsibility becomes identity instead of agreement. There's a private conversation a lot of responsible people have that they rarely say out loud. It sounds like, if I don't do it, it won't get done. If I don't cover the gap, everything falls apart. If I don't keep the peace, the conflict gets worse. If I don't take the extra shift, the money gets tight. If I don't answer right away, they'll think I don't care. If I don't explain it perfectly, I'll be misunderstood. And then you look up and realize your life is one long emergency response. Not because you're chaotic, but because you've been positioned as the solution to everyone else's lack of structure. You've been carrying other people's consequences like they're part of your job description. So you work harder, but it doesn't feel like progress. You earn, but it doesn't feel like safety. You help, but it doesn't feel like connection. You give, but it doesn't feel like love. Because the exchange is off. The math isn't mathing. Not because you're selfish, because you're finally honest. And honesty can feel violent when you've survived by being agreeable. This is why mirror moments matter. They don't punish you. They show you what you've been paying for in silence. They show you the hidden invoice behind your generosity. Now listen carefully. The shift that changes everything isn't stop being responsible. The shift is realizing that responsibility without reciprocation is not virtue. It's a leak. And leaks don't look like disasters at first. They look like little exceptions, little favors. little overtime, little "I'll just handle it." But over time, the leak becomes the reason you're always rebuilding instead of growing. So today, the lens is value exchange. Not in the cold, transactional way, in the human way, the way life actually works. Value exchange is the pattern of what you give, what you receive, what you tolerate, and what you call normal. And when your exchanges are imbalanced long enough, you don't just lose money, you lose clarity, you lose self-respect, you lose your internal sense of what things should cost. Here's where June the 6th becomes specific. In numerology, mirror dates amplify pattern recognition. They highlight symmetry, reflection, and the moment you can't unsee what's true anymore. This date carries a responsibility and balance tone, where overcarrying becomes obvious, and the question sharpens into a decision. What you owe versus what it's costing you. And that's enough about the mechanics. The point isn't the number. The point is what the number mirrors in you. Because the truth is, imbalance has a pattern. It always starts with a story that sounds noble. They need me. It's temporary. I can handle it. It's easier if I do it. I don't want to make a big deal. I'm just being a good person. Then it evolves into a lifestyle. Then it becomes a standard. And then one day you realize you're living inside a contract you never signed with your full awareness. Value exchange dynamics have been studied since humans started trading, bartering, building families, forming guilds, and organizing labor. The earliest economies weren't just about goods. They were about trust, reciprocity, and survival. If one person kept taking and never returning value to the group weakened. That wasn't spiritual language. That was structural reality. The ethics of exchange were the difference between a community that endured and a community that collapsed under resentment and scarcity. Modern life hides that truth under politeness, under hustle culture, under the praise of being low maintenance, under the identity of being the strong one. But the structure hasn't changed. When exchange is consistently one-sided, the system eventually breaks. Sometimes it breaks as a financial crash. Sometimes it breaks as burnout. Sometimes it breaks as a relationship that goes cold. Sometimes it breaks as a body that refuses to keep up. You can see this pattern in workplaces that quietly run on the unpaid overtime of their best employees. The team works so well because one person is smoothing every edge, catching every mistake, answering every message, holding every deadline in their nervous system. They become the invisible infrastructure. They're praised as high-performing, but the truth is the company is renting their life. And because the cost isn't billed as money, it's billed as stress, sleep loss, and the slow fading of joy. That is value exchange dynamics. It's depletion economics dressed up as dedication. You can see it in families where one person becomes the default caretaker, the default organizer, the default emotional buffer. They remember every birthday, manage every conflict, translate every tension, clean up every mess, physical and emotional. They become the only adult in the room, even when everyone is grown, and the family calls it love. But love without reciprocity turns into quiet resentment, and resentment is expensive. It costs you softness, It costs you patience. It costs you your own life. You can see it in business too. The entrepreneur who undercharges because they're afraid of being rejected. The freelancer who keeps adding just one more thing to prove they're worth it. The leader who keeps giving discounts, extended deadlines, extra access, because they think generosity will guarantee loyalty. Then they look up and realize they built a model that trains people to consume them instead of respect them. That's not a morality issue. That's an exchange pattern. This is why June to 6th matters for wealth. Not because money is everything, because money is one of the clearest mirrors of exchange. It doesn't lie. If your life is built on chronic overgiving, your finances often reflect it. If your finances are tight, your time is usually tighter. If your time is tight, your nervous system is usually tighter. And then you're trying to fix money with more effort, when what needs fixing is the agreement underneath your effort. And if you've been reading your exhaustion as personal failure, I want to pull that story out by the root. Sometimes exhaustion is not about capacity. It's about the fact that your output has outpaced your recovery because you're funding other people's comfort with your life. Fatigue is not always about sleep. Sometimes it's about depletion. So what do you do with a mirror like June 6th? You don't panic. You don't swing into coldness. You don't decide you're never helping anyone again. You get precise. You start balancing the ledger like an adult, not like a martyr. Start with a simple observation that feels uncomfortable because it's honest. Notice where your yes is automatic, not thoughtful. Automatic. The yes you give before you check your calendar. The yes you give before you check your energy. The yes you give before you ask whether the other person is capable of doing their part. Automatic yes is often a trauma response disguised as kindness, and wealth can't stabilize on automatic yes. Then notice where you are over-explaining. Over-explaining is often an attempt to buy safety. You think if you say it perfectly, they won't be upset. If you justify it enough, you won't be rejected. But here's what over-explaining actually does. It turns your boundary into a negotiation. It teaches people that your no is flexible if they apply pressure. A clean boundary rarely needs a speech. It needs clarity. Now notice your money leaks. And I'm not only talking about spending. I'm talking about where you subsidize other people, where you cover the bill, where you float the friend, where you spot the family member, where you keep paying for things you resent paying for, where you keep donating resources to dynamics that don't return care. Sometimes that leak is literal money. Sometimes it's time that should have been money. Hours you work for free. Tasks you do because you're faster. Responsibilities you carry because you don't trust others to follow through. And then the deepest adjustment. Notice where you confuse responsibility with worth. This is the root of many wealth patterns. If you believe you earn belonging by being useful, you will overfunction in every room you enter. You will turn your value into labor. You will keep proving yourself even when no one asked you to. And then you'll wonder why you're always tired. June 6th is a day to renegotiate that belief, not with affirmations, with behavior. Choose one place where you stop covering the gap. Not in a dramatic way, in a sober way. Let the consequence belong to the person who created it. If someone forgot, don't rescue. If someone delayed, don't sprint to make it right. If someone didn't prepare, don't over-prepare on their behalf. This is not cruelty. This is reality returning to its rightful owner. Choose one place where you charge correctly. If you run a business, tighten your scope. If you freelance, write what is included and what is not. If you lead a team, stop rewarding incompetence with your overtime. If you're in a job, stop doing senior-level output for entry-level compensation. You don't need a fight. You need a standard. Choose one place where you reclaim time as wealth. Time is not a soft concept. Time is the substrate of your earning power, your clarity, your health, your creativity. If your time is constantly donated, your wealth will always feel like it's trying to catch up. Protecting time is not selfish. It's structural. And for some of you, the most practical move is to pause before you commit. Not forever, just long enough to check whether your body is already saying no. Because your body recognizes misalignment before your mind admits it. That pause is not procrastination. It's intelligence. It's you choosing accuracy over approval. If you do this well, something subtle begins to shift. You stop feeling like life is chasing you. You stop feeling like you're always behind. You stop waking up with that low-grade dread that you have to catch up to the consequences of everyone else's chaos. You start to experience a new kind of wealth first. Internal wealth, the wealth of self-respect, the wealth of calm, the wealth of knowing that your life is not an open tab for other people. You will still be generous, but your generosity will have edges. You will still be loving, but your love will not be self-erasure. You will still work hard, but your work will no longer be a punishment you call ambition. And then, almost quietly, your external wealth begins to respond to that internal shift. Not because the world becomes perfect, because you stop bleeding resources through invisible agreements, because you stop paying for safety with your own depletion, because you finally make responsibility a choice again, not a reflex. So here's the reflection I want to leave you with, and I want you to answer it honestly, not performatively. Where in your life have you been calling it responsibility when it's actually an imbalanced exchange? And what would change in your money, your time, and your peace if you stopped paying that hidden cost? You don't need a bigger life. You need a fairer one, because any wealth built on chronic overgiving is just a polished form of depletion that eventually collects its debt. If this put words to something you've been feeling, share it with someone who carries too much without realizing it, and subscribe if you want more pattern-based clarity like this. Grounded, human, and built for real life, not fantasy.